Hello and welcome to the Life by Design podcast, brought to you by Strategic. This podcast is all about helping you live your great life. Each episode will feature insights from our Chief Investment Officer, Doug Walters. In addition, we'll also have a guest interview. This week, we have Greg Mattacola, Senior Advisor and Partner here at Strategic. Okay, Doug and I are back for our weekly insights. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Jay.
So the question I have for you this week is, what's an action bias?
Right. Yeah. It's this feeling, particularly in challenging situations, that you must do something. Right. And you can imagine where this probably came from. Think about our evolution. Probably taking some action in the face of danger or downside was probably a very good trait. But when it comes to investing, action bias generally does not work in our favor.
Okay. And so specifically, to reference, last week we talked about the correction,
right?
And then we saw a little bit of a change.
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting example. So at the peak of I call it sort of the red screens on CNBC, when all of the graphics turn red, and all of the the media was talking about this correction, which means the market's down 10%. Emotions are high, right? And the media obviously is, that's how they get paid to create this excitement. But what we saw is, on literally the day after that correction, the market started to rebound. So if you had, fallen into the trap of action bias and decided to do something in your portfolio, like sell out of equities and put it in cash, you would have missed the 4.5% rally that's happened since then in U.S. equities.
Yeah, I think it's hard, right? The news really goes hard into items that they want to promote and talk about, and I think someone on the marketing side, like, I see those and I feel that same anxiety too. And so is there what could you recommend to folks? I mean, I know we've been talking for a couple episodes now about trusting the system and the process. Right. What else can you show people or tell people that to maybe calm them down in kind of those times of panic?
Right. Yeah, I think it's important. We talk a lot about preparing the portfolio, right? And that's sort of what we're doing, right? We're not predicting, we're preparing. And diversification, we talk about it ad nauseum. It's one of our favorite topics.
Yes.
But, as an individual investor, you need to prepare yourself really mentally for these moments. And you can do that by looking at history, understanding, for your risk allocation. Let's say you're what I would call a growth investor. You've got 75% of your assets in equities. You can expect the market to fall 10% within a year, pretty much every year. And if you look at, on a yearly basis, if you were look at history, you're going to see those 10% declines happen pretty regularly. You're going to see years, a full year down 20% on occasion. And you need to be prepared to take that risk and understand that's just part of the risk you get for the reward that hopefully is down the road for the long-term investors who stay the course.
Yeah, I like that. And it's hard. And I think that's why, having a professional financial planner on your side is always good to kind of help you through those times.
Right.
Yeah. And then, so talking about that, we saw the rebound, and then what's kind of the headline of the week for you this week?
Yeah, I think it's just resetting those expectations, right? We, hopefully, you didn't fall into the trap of action bias. You stayed invested. And so now, fresh start on the new week. Last week was kind of flat. This week, market's up a bit. I think it's just about how quickly the market can change. What's happened this week, we've had a bit of change of tone in terms of tariffs. Maybe they're not going to be as onerous as was originally discussed. Market likes that. So we get a rebound. Again, we don't want to be reacting to these, but that's what seems to be driving the market this week. Yep.
Yeah, and then I know we don't really look ahead or try to predict the future, but what are some things that maybe folks can be prepared for so that they don't, if something happens, they don't really get panicked?
Right. Yeah, I think they should be prepared for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that sounds pretty generic, but you just don't know. And I think, I like to use this example a lot. We're into episode 3. I've probably already used it, but think about the pandemic, right? And how unpredictable that was, and how big of an impact it had on the markets, right? We had a significant market decline initially, and a very quick rebound. And then, because of all the stimulus that went into the economy, a tremendous performing stock market. Nobody predicted that. And probably nobody would have predicted how the market reacted had they even known it was going to happen.
Right.
So you just have to be prepared for moments. That's an extreme example,
Yeah.
but you should go into every week just prepared for whatever it might throw at you, and ready to take advantage of it again. And I'm going to hit it again and again, probably every week, Jay. But diversification,
Yeah.
systematic rebalancing, systematically selling high and buying low. So if that opportunity presents itself, you're ready for it and you're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and I think I would take that even further. And for those of you that have been keeping up, and I'm going to have my last interview with Greg about behavioral finance on this episode. And really, I think another one advice that Greg would give you, and the things we talk about, is don't even look week to week,
Yeah.
right? Like, just give it a rest and like let it sit, like, and know that this happens. There's going to be news that's going to go up and down, and you're in it for the long term, and that's where you should stay.
Right. Yeah. Don't even look at don't look at the financial news.
Yeah.
Don't look at your portfolio day to day. That's all great advice for long-term investors.
Okay, and so I think this week insights on the blog was very focused towards this topic.
Yep.
And also comparing it to soccer.
Yeah.
And so why the comparison to soccer?
Yeah, well, I said there's 2 reasons. One is I am surrounded in the office by 2 super fans. So Matt and Dave on either side of me, both are regular Premiership watchers. But then also it allows me to bring up my story about David Beckham, which is it's on the strategic website. I sneak it in now and again, but it's a claim to fame, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, so really quick, I'd love to hear the story. I know, but please tell us just a little bit about how you played David Beckham.
Yeah. So back when I was in high school, my coach decided he was going to take the team overseas. He'd always wanted to go, so he decided this was the year. We raised money and we went over and played a bunch of different soccer teams over in England. Tremendous experience, had some good games, some bad games, but overall just a wonderful time. Fast forward from there to about 15 years ago, so quite a few years later. I won't do the math exactly for you. A friend of mine says, "Hey, did you hear we played against David Beckham when we were in England?" I'm like, "Well, it's a great story. How in the heck can you, how the heck do we verify that?" Well, sure enough, I'm telling my parents this story. My mom says, I have your agenda from back in 1990. She pulls it out, and sure enough, we'd played the Brimstone Rovers youth team, which David Beckham was on in 1990, and he was the player of the year that year. In fact.
Man.
Yeah.
I love that story so much. It's so good. Well, there you go, everyone. I know if you read the weekly insights, you're like, well, now I want to know the story. You were just like me, and here we are. And because of the podcast, I could force him to tell us. Right. So here we go. Well, thanks, Doug. Thanks again so much, and look forward to hearing more in the future.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Take care.
Welcome back. I'm back with Greg. I'm very excited. Still excited. 3 in.
Amazing. We're still doing this.
And we're kind of wrapping up for now our little series here on behavioral finances and just kind of understanding our own biases, our own emotions. And, we kind of introduced it to you. We talked last week about not all of them, but a good chunk of the biases you can face in the world, and how they relate not only to finances, but all my real world examples that I toss in there. And that's just because that's just how I relate it to myself. And now we're going to kind of talk about some actionable, I guess, skills, actionable things we can do to avoid some of this, or to maybe fight against it a little bit, maybe too, right? Like, I don't know that we can avoid all of them, but at least we can put some roadblock blocks in place to hopefully stop us from doing some of those emotional things.
Absolutely.
Does that sound fair?
Yeah, that's a perfect description, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain ways that we can kind of correct in the moment, and there's also some certain things that we can do proactively to head off these these cognitive biases that we all have, that we're all prone to. None of us are robots. We all have emotions, we all have feelings. We've all had things that have impacted us and changed the way we feel about things. So it's there's things that we can put in place to try to avoid those and make our investments more of a rational, evidence-based approach versus responding kind of in knee-jerk ways to emotions.
Yeah. Well, and I think for the listeners, the good news for you is you're already a couple steps on, because our first one is education and self-awareness. So
That's right.
you're already on the path to success.
That's exactly right. You've already gained the building blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because one of the first things is just being aware about it, right, Greg?
It is, and that's where it all starts. And I think we have talked about this in every episode, and so we may as well complete the hat trick, right? The Gordie Howe hat trick. It's being aware of what we're doing, right? And kind of being able to step outside ourselves and look down at what we're feeling, and just kind of naming it and identifying it and recognizing it is so important. That emotional intelligence. And we all are subject to emotions at different times, and you can't stop emotions from coming, right? There is no way that I'm aware of for humans to, unless it's with significant, medication, to avoid being sad sometimes, avoid being happy, avoid feeling overwhelmed or anxious. These emotions will come, right? There may be all sorts of triggers, external, internal, whatever the case may be. These emotions are going to come. What you can do, right, kind of at the peak of self-actualization, is regulating them, recognizing them, being aware of them, and then taking steps to regulate them. And you can do that in the moment. And then you can also take steps to almost kind of dummy proof yourself from some of your emotions, and head them off. And even if they're happening, it's not going to impact things because you've already put a few things in place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I like that. And I think it's kind of putting in the checks and balances of just
Exactly right.
the whole of yourself, basically, right? And
Exactly right.
And I mean, I think we do, to give credit to myself mostly, but maybe some of our listeners. I think in this day and age, hopefully, we're already doing that, and going looking at things. I know I always equate these to real world, but like one of the things, my favorite thing to do lately has been, my wife will see like a poster for a new movie that's coming out on Facebook, and she'll be like, "Is this real or is this AI?" Right? And we have to really
Right.
sit there and think about it. And I go, "No, it's AI. It's AI." And so hopefully doing that with everything, especially with financial decisions, right? And your risk tolerance, and just looking at it and going, "Is this how I really feel about this, or am I just reacting to something in this moment? Is there some sort of outside influence that's making me make this decision, or calling Greg to say I want to get out of this particular investment?"
Exactly. And I think, if you look at the way that we approach it, I think any good financial advisor approaches it, it's kind of beginning with the end in mind, right? So sitting down with folks talking to them about what the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years uh, that they want it to look like. And, where do they, what is their definition of great life? That means very different things for very different people.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, some want the second home and warmer climates. Some want something very different than that. It's going to differ person to person. So we sit down with folks, we talk to them about what that looks like for them. If they can envision it, what do they see? Then we talk about where they are currently, income stream, expenses, obligations, etc., upcoming things that are going to need to be funded and dealt with. Could be a child's education, could be wedding of your daughter, could be a number of different things. We want to talk to them about their comfort with risk and the risk that they are comfortable in taking, and how they respond and feel about shifts in the market.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
And there's tools to do that. There are risk questionnaires. They're not foolproof, right? There's a lot of variability across all these different questionnaires. They're not a perfect measurement, but they're at least a step, a tool. Really, what it comes down to is getting to know your client, and getting to know, geez, if the market drops 10% in a day, right? Like picture COVID, some of the steep drops that we had during the heightened fear of COVID. Are you someone that's going to call me and say, sell everything? Are you someone that's going to kind of stay calm? Are you someone that might not even know that it's going on because you know that this is a 30-year deal,
Right,
and you just trust that everything is in place?
Yeah.
Getting to know folks on that kind of intimate and personal level is important, right? Because it plays into what you put into place for them in terms of kind of combating some of those emotions and biases.
Well, and I think it's interesting, right? And this is one of our actionable items, which is consulting with an advisor who has an unbiased perspective. And I think to that point, you personally may think you're okay with risk and a high risk, and then when it happens, you then suddenly go, "Oh, I wasn't ready.
Right.
That was not what I thought that meant."
This doesn't feel good at all.
Yeah. I said I was ready for this, but I am not. And I think that's where a good advisor comes in and says, "Okay, yes, you're saying high risk. Let's go pedal to the metal. But what let's talk about what that actually means. Let's look at it, and you may back down from that and be more moderate, or or some risk, and I think just having a person who's rational, who has the expertise, who has an outside perspective, and just can have that steady hand on the wheel is going to be helpful for you, right?
That's exactly right. And there's a few different ways of looking at that and a few different approaches, right? There's the risk that we're comfortable with, but there's also sometimes the risk that we need to take, right? So if somebody comes to us, and they're 55 years old, and maybe they had a number of different life events that impacted their ability to really save and plan for the future. They could have gone through a divorce. They could have gone through a major medical issue that sapped their resources. You see this in a number of different scenarios, and they're behind, right? They don't want to work till they're 90. They would love to retire at a reasonable age, say 65, even 70, and they're behind the 8 ball. Well, we show them what the projections play out, right? At this level of saving, at this type of portfolio, this is what you can hope, reasonably expect to have at age 65 or 70. It may be that you need to take a little bit more risk to achieve your objectives.
Yep.
But the important thing is having that conversation and getting buy-in. Investment policy statements can play a big role in that, kind of showing this is what we talked about.
Right.
This is what your goals are. Yeah. This is what we need to do to reach those goals. This is the allocation that's required to do that of your portfolio. That's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
And then you always revisit that, right?
Of course.
Often.
100%.
Is
Yeah.
this still good? Does it still feel
Right.
good? Let's look at where our projections are. Are we on pace? Are we off pace? How are you feeling about it? How did
Yeah.
this last few days in the market feel to you, right? We've got a new administration changing a lot of policies all at once, a lot of different changes, putting some stress on the market. How did that feel?
Yeah.
Are you queasy at night? Are you not sleeping? Because we don't want folks not sleeping. That's
Yeah.
the last thing we want, right? We want them leaving our office and going forth in life feeling lighter. If they're feeling lighter and know, like you said, there's a steady hand on the wheel
Yeah.
and they trust in that, then we're really doing our jobs well.
Yeah, and I think that's big, right? Because with any decision that's emotional and has any like long term effects tied to it, right? It's a difficult decision in the moment, and I find for me personally, sometimes I wasn't 100% paying attention because my mind was roaming on this one thing that
Mm-hmm.
somebody said, or am I really ready for risk? Like, and that's just what I focus on for the rest of the meeting,
Right.
you know? And so having that ability to connect with someone, and say, okay, can you remind me? I know we talked about this, or have the documentation in front of you and go, okay, this is yes, all right, I understand what we're doing. And just not every day, but, annually checking in and just making
Exactly
sure,
right.
like, are we still good? you know?
And the flip side of it is a big thing too. People always think about that they might have buyer's remorse, so to speak,
Mm,
when they've chosen a very aggressive portfolio and we go through a volatile period
mm,
and there's a dip, right, in performance and in their values, and you have to talk them through that. Okay, this was what led us to this
yeah.
allocation, right? These were your goals, these were the projections, this is what it was showing, this is why we collectively together chose this.
Mm,
But we see it on the opposite end of the spectrum as well. When we meet with folks and they are adamant that, oh no, I have no risk tolerance whatsoever. This stuff makes me sick to my stomach. I will be up all night, every night, if I see massive swings in my portfolio. So if we match a portfolio very tailored to that, very conservative, to limit the volatility as much as possible, that's great. But but that also needs reminders, right? Because in great market times
right. Yeah.
where equities are going through the roof and they're seeing, because we've talked about this, they're getting all kinds of onslaught of information
Yep.
on a daily basis from TikTok and Instagram and the news channels and all the various, oh my God, the market's on fire. People are making money hand over fist. And they're seeing a 3% growth rate. Well, how come I'm not
Yeah.
making all this money that TikTok's talking about? Well, remember, like this is what,
Right.
there's trade-offs,
Right.
right? So it's that revisiting, it's keeping on track. It's that, you know, looking at the end goal, but also, making sure that we're in line with that, our unique risk tolerances.
Yeah, and I think, one of the topics too we wanted to cover, which is in line with that, is avoiding those present biases, which is up or down, right? Is kind of automating a lot of this and just saying, okay, whether it's you or you're doing it with your advisor, you're just going to automate the investments
Mm-hmm.
and you're just going to take a step back because it's just going to make that first decision once, allowing that future growth without you affecting it based on what's happening that day or that month.
That's exactly right. I mean, it becomes a thing that you don't think about. It's going out of your account automatically or out of your paycheck automatically. It's why a lot of retirement plans now have an automatic opt-in
Mm,
feature, right? To push people, nudge people towards saving for their future. They have to take an affirmative action to opt out of the retirement plan. It's kind of nudging folks towards these things that are for their own good. And that does combat a lot of it. And really, it's the advisor's job to constantly bring you back to your plan,
Yep.
right? Every one of our clients has a financial plan tailored to them, and it covers all sorts of different categories, tax efficiency and estate plan and insurance analysis and retirement and budget. And it's up to the advisor to constantly be checking into that plan and saying, okay, even with all the volatility,
Yeah.
we've got this in place, check. We've got this in place, check. Like reassuring them that we're still on the path to where they want to get to.
Well, and I think too, setting those long-term goals or your, deciding what your great life is in 10, 20, 30 years, you'll start to see the patterns, right, of how that's working out. And so when you get in a couple years into this and you have those long-term goals, you're not torn by these biases, these impulsive biases, and you're just seeing the pattern. You're going, oh, you know what? There were some ups, there were some downs, and we've just seen a steady return. That's actually not bad.
That's exactly right.
That's actually really good.
Yeah, and when looking at, and that's one of the ways to combat this, right, is showing folks, look what the S&P has done over the course of the last 75 years, 100 years. If you are well diversified and you've got a portfolio in line with and in accordance with your goals and your risk tolerance, and it's being rebalanced and looked at like we do on a weekly basis, it's going to work.
Yeah.
I hate this. I have grown to hate this expression because it now represents a complete failure with the Philadelphia 76ers, but trust the process, right?
Yeah.
Like if you remember when Joel Embiid came aboard, it hasn't worked out that well for the 76ers, but in many ways, evidence-based, stick to the plan, revisit frequently, right? Make sure that everything is still in accordance with your goals and your risk and all of those things. But it's up to the advisor to sometimes convince folks that the most important action you can take right now is not taking an action.
Inaction.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes taking that drastic knee-jerk reaction, because that's inherent in all of us. If something bad is happening, chaos is flying all around, we want to do something.
Yep.
Well, sometimes that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
And ask the folks that, went to cash in the height of COVID. They missed that rebound that happened just a couple months after, right? That drastic action is sometimes the worst thing for you.
Yeah.
So that's really where the advisor kind of earns their keep.
Yeah, and I think too, a takeaway for the audience as well is, and you had said it in there, is diversity and embracing that and understanding that, like, let's take NVIDIA as an example, right? Like that starts to shoot to the moon, like, and a lot of people like put everything I have in NVIDIA, right? And you don't want that, right? Because where there's an up, there's a down, and you want to make sure that you're guarded against that. And so by diversifying, like, sure, maybe there's a little bit in NVIDIA or whatever to get you some money, but you want to diversify across multiple assets and classes so that you're stable.
That's exactly right. I don't. It was said here recently by either Alan or Doug, and I stealing it as my own. I've used it 100 times since then. Diversification means always having to say you're sorry. There's always going to be one hot sector, one hot stock, one very narrow thing that's taking off or outperforming everything else. And geez, if we were, psychics, you'd have it all there, just like you just said. But that's not. That is not logical,
right.
And it makes, it's not responsible, and it would breach our fiduciary duty to have you allocated across a number of sectors. That way you're going to take advantage of whatever is, the hot thing at the moment. Sure, there may be something else that lags at that particular time. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of part of the overall plan.
Right.
Yeah.
And just trusting in that process, like you said, and in the plan, and then just going back and just really thinking about your realistic great life, right? And just saying, okay, does this up or down or whatever it is truly affect that great life? And a lot of the time the answer is no.
That's correct.
Yeah, because it's that great life isn't, maybe for some people we have dreams of like being a millionaire, a billionaire, or whatever that is, but like, is that a realistic great life, or is your great life, just in 30, 50 years, oh, I got grandkids, they come over, we have a house that's paid off, we've got, maybe we get to go on a vacation twice, 2, 3 times a year with the grandkids and our children. Like, that's honing that and grounding it into something that's based in reality, I think is the best for all of us. And just say, what do I really want out of this?
100%. And what we often see sometimes is folks are existing off of far less than what they have, right? And they've got X dollars invested, and they're not even coming close to needing all of it, but yet their emotions are as if they can't make they can't eat next week. So you have to say, wait, hold on, let's take a larger picture here. Your income stream is X, your expenses are Y, your assets are actually growing year after year in retirement. They're not even dwindling down. So a turbulent month, a turbulent cycle is not going to impact your day-to-day life in any way, shape, or form. Right. You're actually managing these investments for the next generation. So let's think about what a 20-year-old would want in terms of allocation, because that's really who you're managing these investments for.
Yeah, right.
So it's every situation is different. Every client's goals and situation and great life is unique to them. So it's knowing that and kind of taking that broader long-term approach.
Yeah, and there's just so many different ways, like you said, that the great life is different, and there's so many different ways that looks to you. And I think not getting stuck in that classical, like, what a great life is, and just thinking about personally what it is to you, because I think we're all surprised on how much or little money that actually is needed to make that possible, right?
100%. And we're seeing very big differences generationally too. Yeah. And I think that is also something that, is a difference maker these days in terms of, I've talked about emotional intelligence and how that plays into, kind of setting yourself apart as an advisor. Well, being aware of and knowing generational differences and how people look at things generationally is, I think, as important as well, because, what we're seeing is people, coming out of college now and entering the workforce now have very different priorities and ways of thinking than our clients that are in their 70s and 80s and what they value.
100%.
We're seeing more experiences and not as much, emphasis on kind of the second home or whatever the case may be. They want their money on travel and experiencing this, and very different and very different risk tolerances and very different, attitudes about money.
Yeah.
So the one size approach does not fit all, and you have to be aware of who your client is and what's important to them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for the listeners, again, understanding that for yourself and say, and not having that, like, that looking at your neighbors and going, oh, well, they're doing all this, and really asking yourself, is that your great life, or is that just what you think you should be doing? Right?
Don't fall into that hurting trap.
Right.
We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, and that goes across social media and then all these things like, oh, geez, so-and-so's on this trip. How come I'm not on that trip? Well, do you even want to be on that trip?
Right. Yeah. Do you want to go see Taylor Swift? Right. The answer is yes.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Resoundingly.
Yeah, everyone say yes on that. But But yeah, I think that's good, and I hope the folks at home really get to pick up some stuff about this and can look internally and hopefully catch some of these biases in themselves. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having Greg on again. And thanks, Greg, so much. This was great.
Can't wait. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Please see the full disclosure in our show notes for more information.